As the world moves more and more into the online space, tech experts are warning that the price of gaming consoles and laptops could soar in the coming months. One of the main reasons, a global shortage of semiconductors. Well, what is a semiconductor and how will this affect South Africans' consumers? Tech columnist and editor of Stuff magazine, Toby Shapshak, joins me now to discuss this. Toby, let's start with what are semiconductors?
Well, firstly, happy Easter from the Jew in the family. Semiconductors are basically the heart of the third industrial revolution. They are microprocessors. They are the chips in our computers and now in our smartphones that allow for all of the wonders of the internet and communication. You know, I'm sitting on a cell phone using Skype to do a television interview. That's 4 or 5 different forms of technology, all of which use microprocessors to function. But increasingly, everything uses processors. In America, Ford's had to halt sales or slow down sales of its best-selling bakkie, although they call it a pickup truck, the F-150, because they can't get microprocessors. And bizarrely enough, one of the other influences, not just the coronavirus pandemic, but also there was a massive winter freeze in Texas. Now, Texas is still, like Silicon Valley, a bit of a hub for silicon development. There are lots of companies base themselves there, especially Austin, the capital. It's where the famous South by Southwest conference happens, bizarrely. That's where Twitter was launched, and that's where the idea for Uber came from. And Elon Musk has just moved to Texas as well. And because of the freeze for several weeks, it's also held up the production of microprocessors. Some factories are still based there. And that just means that all of the industries that rely on chips in the middle of their devices, be it a smartphone, a car, a television, all of these things now need them. And of course, when there's a shortage, supply and demand economics mean if there's a lack of supply and there's a lot of demand, the prices go up. And they are, and there's an expectation. And we covered this in the Financial Mail this week. My colleague Duncan McLeod, who's actually the editor of techcentral.co.za, was writing about just this exact problem. And the CEO and founder of Mustec, the largest independent computer reseller in South Africa, Microsoft Gold partner, the CEO, David Chan, was saying exactly this, that they are expecting significant increases in the cost of these devices, specifically laptops and gaming consoles. Now, gaming consoles is a kind of like a 7-year refresh cycle. The 2 big gaming console manufacturers are Microsoft and Sony, and they bring out the new versions pretty much every 7 years. And this December was the big launch of both of their new models. With 2 models, a high end and a low end. And of course, you just can't get them for love or money. And I've had people phoning me all through December, begging me to speak to somebody at, one of the distributors if they've got stock. And, the stock was pre-sold before it even landed in South Africa of the Sony PlayStations, for instance. And that's just because there's just so much global demand and there's not enough supply. And it's starting to really affect the computer manufacturers. This week, TSMC, which is the Taiwanese massive outsource company, they make, that's Foxconn, TSMC they outsource company for making chips for people, including Apple. They're by far the largest in the mobile space, and they've warned that they expect a 10% reduction in selling products, and they're referring to Apple's phones, warning the world that there's going to be 10% less of some of the gadgets that we all have to buy. And in fact, this is a significant problem for every industry. There's nothing in the world or nothing electronic in the world that doesn't have some kind of microprocessor in it, that hasn't some kind of smarts or intelligence, and all of this creates this backlog of need. And one of the other factors, strangely enough, which is, that the US government, while Donald Trump was still president, campaigned against Huawei and threatened to stop US companies from buying or dealing with Huawei, which they then did, including Google, so it can't give them their Android operating system. So what Huawei did was Huawei bought up massive amounts of microprocessors and RAM and all sorts of other components from American companies. So that's exacerbated it as well. And in a way, not only is Trump's ill-fated and ill-conceived campaign against a Chinese company like Huawei, all it's done is strengthen the hand of the companies and the countries that Trump was trying to work against. Was Huawei and China. Now China, of course, they don't want to be reliant on American chip manufacturers anymore. They don't want to be caught if there's a freeze in Texas, and they are very aggressively pursuing their own patterns and programs to make them a very capable high-tech producer. Of course, so many of the components are produced in Taiwan, Shenzhen. Shenzhen is the enormous industrial center, just across the river or across on the mainland from Hong Kong, where something like 90% of all consumer electronics in the world are manufactured. So this is a really significant thing. There's a global shortage. China, against Huawei and other Chinese firms. China already had a strategy called China 2024 or 25, which was a big strategy to start building all the things they bought from someone else: screens, processors, RAM, graphics processors, etc., etc. So all that's done is really just make China more aggressive at being independent and more aggressive at not relying on America. And of course, the backlash is now we see this global shortage. All of the chips that would have been in circulation have been bought up by Huawei quite legitimately. I mean, if you're a business and your supply is going out of business or they're going to blacklist you, you buy all the stock you can. And that's where the world finds itself. So if you wanted to buy a Bucky that had a chip in it, you're going to have to wait. And of course, the economic cost is enormous. It's these are automotive factories designed to pump out cars an hour or a day, and they're working at a go slow, which means you're paying salaries, you're paying all the other overheads, but you're not producing enough product to be able to sell to cover your overheads. It's slightly different with electronics manufacturers, but the same principles apply. You want to make an X number of iPhones every quarter so that you can sell them, so that you can make your money. But if your supplier can't supply them because their supplier can't supply them with microprocessors, it impacts the entire value chain all the way through, from the manufacturers to us as consumers. Vodacom wants to sell me that brand new iPhone.
You've literally taken all of my questions and answered them in one. So my last question to you would be to explain what this means for us here in South Africa locally in terms of prices.
Unfortunately, as Mustec CEO David Chan said in the Financial Mail this week, the chances are they are going to go up. And that's out of our hands. It's out of our control. This is the global situation. If you are a manufacturer and you only have 5 units to send and everybody wants 20 units, you're going to send them, probably to your tier 1 countries, tier 1 customers. We are increasingly that, certainly in terms of the context of EMEA, the Middle East and Europe. South Africa is really seen as a significant country. But nonetheless, they're probably going to supply home countries first. Apple will supply America. Most people are going to make sure they get enough stock into China to keep feeding that vociferous consumer market. But we don't know yet. We just know that the chances are things are going to go up. One of the camera manufacturers told me this week that they were burgled and they can't get new stock. They simply can't get new stock because there is no new stock. I wanted to order during lockdown last year. I wanted to order some new Sennheiser microphones. Jabra. They were Jabra headphones, and there was a global backlog. They just can't make them because they need microprocessors that go into these little hearing things. So this is the knock-on effect. The chances are, like David Chan warns us, we are probably going to pay 30% more. Sorry.
Thank you very much for your time, Mr. Toby Shapshak, here on eNCA, editor of Stuff magazine.